way they're actually relieved.
Please be seated. All right, I'd like to call to order. I'd like to call to order this county board meeting on Thursday, September 18th at 6:31 p.m. Roll call, please.
Jay? Here. Kibler? Langenheim? Here. Maxwell? Here. McGuire? Michaels? Here. Mitchell? Here. Petrie?
Here.
Quisenberry? Here. Richards? Rosales?
Here.
Schrader? Schwartz? Here. Alex? Here. Bergson? Here. Carter? Cowart? Esri?
Here.
Harper? Here. Harkey?
Here.
James? Here. Kurtz?
Here. We have a quorum. Thank you. If you're trying to achieve, there will be roadblocks. I've had them. Everyone has had them. But obstacles don't have to stop you. If you run into a wall, don't turn around and give up. Figure out how to climb it, go through it, or work around it. Pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Can I have the notice of the meeting read, please?
Notice is hereby given that a regular meeting of the County Board, Champaign County, Illinois, will convene on September 18th, 2014, at 6:30 p.m. in the Lyle Shields Meeting Room, Brookings Administrative Center, 1776 East Washington Street, Urbana, Illinois, and said county for the purpose of allowing and ordering payments of claims against the county, receiving and acting upon reports of committees and such other matters as may be brought before said meeting, which said meeting shall continue in session from day to day until the completion of said business.
Thank you. I'd like a motion to accept Mr. Maxwell and Mr. James. Second. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. A motion to approve the agenda and addendum, please. Mr.
So moved.
Rosales, have a second, please. Mr. J, thank you. Any changes or discussion on the agenda? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have the date and time of the next regular meeting, standing committees, committee of the whole, and the county board meetings for your referral on the front page of the agenda. What's that?
We need a vote on the highway meeting because they changed the date.
Oh, okay. Where was that? Highway meeting? All right, we have to, what's the date on it? One, please.
The highway meeting on the regular annual calendar was listed for October 10th. The highway committee is requesting that it be changed to October 3rd, so we should have a motion by the board to approve the change of that date to October 3rd.
All right, can I have a motion, please? Max, second by Lorraine, who is the chair of the highway committee. Any questions or concerns, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries on the change of the time, on the date of the highway committee meeting. Let's move to the consent agenda. Yes, Patsy?
Since we have such a nice number of audience here this evening, just to point out on our agenda that we have two special Finance Committee meetings coming up, one on the 23rd of September at 6:30, and then another one on the 30th of September, again at 6:30.
Thank you. Like a motion to accept the consent agenda, please? So moved. So moved by Mr. James, second. Second by Mr. Esri. Any moves are on the consent? I need a roll call vote, please. Roll call.
Jay?
Yes.
Langenheim?
Yes.
Maxwell?
Yes.
McGuire?
Yes.
Michaels?
Yes.
Mitchell?
Yes.
Petrie?
Yes?
Quisenberry?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Rosales?
Yes.
Schwartz?
Yes.
Alex?
Yes.
Bergson?
Yes.
Court? Esri?
Yes.
Harper?
Yes.
Harkey?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Kurtz?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like my vote to count too,
Yes.
please, as a yes.
And you have it. Mr. Schroeder is in attendance. Mr. McGuire is also in attendance. Yes. Okay. Were you a yes? You were a yes. Thank you very much, Jim. All right. Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you very much. We're going to move to public participation. If you haven't filled out one of these slips and you want to speak, please, this back corner of the room, please bring it up to us. The rules are very simple. Each of the public has 5 minutes to state their concerns, and we will go 1 hour if it takes that long. So it's 5 minutes per, and we'll start with Mr. No, I'm sorry, he just gave me that. That goes down at the bottom. David Prochaska, is that how it's pronounced? Okay. Please press the button on the microphone right in front of you, sir, in the center down. That's it. And pull it towards you so that we can hear you better. Thank you.
Good evening. In the entire UK in an entire year, all of the police combined fire fewer bullets than the officer who killed Mike Brown. Militarization of police. We already saw it in the aftermath of Katrina. How pervasive it has become in our culture. Support the troops, which I agree with. Repeated so often, it's become reflexive. The new News Gazette series with Icon, a salute to those who served. My father was a pilot of a B-29 during the Second World War. Stationed briefly at Chinook, he bombed Japan, Tokyo repeatedly, received the DSC, but never talked about it, never bragged about it. My uncle, 19 months older than Dad, was a conscientious objector. How exactly would the News Gazette expect him to feel? Can anyone here deny that since 9/11, civil liberties, the freedom to demonstrate, dissent, have been curtailed, cordoned off in free speech zones? Which sends a message. Is this the society we want? Post-Ferguson, we now learn that the Pentagon has been recycling for years hundreds of millions of dollars worth of military equipment to local police. I didn't have enough money to take advantage of the economic stimulus plan, Cash for Clunkers, but local police across the nation can get virtually for free $700,000 MRAPs. Are we doing it because we can or because we want or feel we need to? Who's in the driver's seat? Locally, the eagerness of police to get in on a good deal has been clearly documented. Equally clearly, police seem to have given little or no consideration to how the public would react, perceive this, such militarization. Are we doing it because we can or because we need to? Yet some departments already before Ferguson have refused militarization MRAPs. Saginaw, Davis, Seattle, Berkeley. Not because they could not, but because they chose not to. How is crime there different? Spiked? What do you, as police, learn from them? You have the opportunity here to not let it get that far, to refuse it. Consider Ferguson. Militarization has elicited a national and international reaction. It's been a PR disaster. You got a problem on your hands when Egyptian veterans of Arab Spring demonstrations advise U.S. citizens on how to protect themselves against militarized police. Now that is twisted. But the most powerful argument is that you already have all the equipment you need by any reasonable measure. Both in Champaign and in Champaign County, 4700 DT 466Es, 1986 Brinks trucks. Conclusion, do the right thing and don't do it. Tell the Pentagon thanks, but no thanks. Ship it back to where you got it. In the UK, an entire year, all the police combined fired fewer bullets than the officer who killed Mike Brown. Thank you.
Brian Dalinar, please. Is there a Brian Dalinar? What's happened? Oh, that's this gentleman, okay.
Good evening, I'm Brian Dolan. I live at 303 West Locust in Urbana, and I'm also here to speak on the MRAP tonight. I'm a part of a group called Champaign-Urbana Citizens for Peace and Justice. We've been around for 10 years now, tackling these kinds of issues. And this last Saturday, the September 13th, we passed a resolution in regards to the MRAP, which I simply wanted to present for you tonight. I passed around copies, if those could please be inserted in the public record. A resolution on the MRAP. Whereas the public is deeply concerned with the militarization of local police after witnessing law enforcement dressed in military gear, pointing assault rifles and using crowd control devices on nonviolent protesters demonstrating against the police killing of Mike Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. Whereas the Department of Defense's 1033 program has come under increased scrutiny for distributing military-grade weapons and equipment to local police. Whereas law enforcement in Champaign County have received in excess of 100 assault rifles through the 1033 program, including at Parkland College, where police have been given M16 assault rifles. Whereas the Champaign County Sheriff's Office has acquired a mine-resistant, armor-protected MRAP vehicle through the 1033 program, a vehicle designed for war in military zones and inappropriate for civilian use. Whereas the Sheriff's Office has said publicly that the MRAP will be used with the Sheriff's Metro SWAT team, whereas African Americans are disproportionately targeted by SWAT raids in Champaign County, most commonly through warrants for drug searches. Therefore, it be resolved that CUCPJ recommends that the Sheriff immediately decommission the MRAP. Be it further resolved that CUCPJ calls on Champaign County to withdraw from the 1033 program. And that's a resolution that we as a group passed. And we hope that in the future, coming weeks, so we can work with the county board to find ways in which we can begin to demilitarize the police in Champaign County. We don't want our neighborhoods used as military zones. Thank you.
Natalie Prochaska.
Good evening. My name is Natalie Prochaska. I live at 9 O'Connor Court in Champaign. I want to come to speak with you today about the direction that we're heading as a county and a community, and ask you all to seriously reflect on what the budget decisions you make in the next few weeks will say about our priorities as a community moving forward. I came and spoke last spring. I'm also a member of the Planners Network and a current U of I student, although I am a townie. I was born and raised here. I've recently, in my department, been put in the position of local expert with out-of-state students regularly asking me what I think about the community, especially career-wise, asking for advice on whether they should stay here and work after graduating or move on to Chicago or other places. A year ago, in light of the commitment of the $120,000 to pay for the ILPP report's expertise-based recommendations, and the board's decision to not move forward on building new jail facilities, instead choosing to contribute $200,000 towards social programs meant to decrease the jail population, I was really excited. And have been come to be known in my department for basically telling everyone who would listen how wonderful it was to live in a community where the elected officials actually make time for their constituencies' input and have the right policy priorities. Goals focused on improving the livability of the entire area for its citizens, for all its citizens, not just historically privileged groups. So unlike my experiences living in Chicago, I felt like the people I've talked to and worked with in our current court and political system here listen to public input. So that's the vein in which I'd like to speak to you this evening. When the RFQ for the Justice Facility Center was pushed through in an expedited fashion last spring, and the conversation suddenly shifted back to building a new multi-million-dollar facility, the rhetoric changed, incorporating the needs of the mentally ill. I was shocked, disappointed, and a little bit disillusioned. Let's not kid ourselves. The sheriff is not and cannot be a provider of primary mental health care and treatment. No new facility and no new management is going to make them therapists, and the short lengths of stay make effective therapy regimens near impossible. I want to just reiterate some of the ILPP report, underline some of their comments. In spite of its shortcomings, the satellite jail is suitable for expansion to accommodate staffing and housing needs and is more modern and better designed than the downtown jail. The incarceration of low-risk, high-need offenders reflects the neglect of alternatives that would actually result in very large net savings. Most of the inmates are minimum and medium risk, 63%. Many arrests involve city ordinance violations, traffic violations, and other low-level offenses. A third of all releases occur within 24 hours and most within 3 days. So just kind of reiterating that. The board has now spent more on consultants for the jail issue than on programs to keep people out of jail. Even more disturbing, this is happening against the background of other events that have already been brought up: the county's acquisition of the MRAP, the sheriff's purchase of a drone, the turn of local conversation about appropriate ways of spending public revenue, from preventative community service programs to a dialogue casting into our future and leveraging our financial future for expanded incarceration measures, isn't just outdated. I find it unacceptable. We don't need more jail cells. We need representatives willing to protect our most vulnerable populations from a future where going to jail is a prerequisite for getting access to mental health, drug treatment, and other social programs. Especially when considering the new budget, I urge you to be critical about what the expenditure allotments say about our social priorities as a community. Increased 2014 court system fees were implemented on a flat scale rather than a sliding scale based on affordability. Last year, increased fees were approved for users of the justice system. There was a $7 increase from $10 to $17 for the law library, which helps approximately 2,000 defendants representing themselves per year, and has since 2012. That's $34,000 collected from the incarcerated. Ostensibly, these are deposited into special revenue funds specifically designated for expenditures related to those operations. But for our criminal justice system to be dependent on user fees to supplement revenues is incredibly problematic, precisely
Your 5 minutes is up. Thank
All
you
right.
very much
Thanks
for
for your
your
time.
contribution. Appreciate it. Patsy Howell. Ms. Patsy Howell, please.
Hi. So my name is Patsy Howell. I live at 117 Broadway in Urbana, by the Black Dog, if any of you've been there. And what I'm here for tonight, I was involved at some extent.
Would you move the microphone towards you?
Okay.
Okay.
I was involved last year and some in the building of a new jail and was against that and made a vocal. But what I'm here for tonight is the militarization of police departments. It's happening all around the country, but I only want to speak to here because this is where I am. This is where my grandchildren are. This is where the people I care about are. And one of the things that I wish had happened, someone from a Muslim organization I'm involved in is from Egypt, the Muslim American Society, who will hopefully come up soon and talk about what a tank means in other countries, what MRAP means in Egypt, what MRAP means in Palestine. I was talking to a Palestinian young sister and said, we're scared, we're very intimidated by this. What I need for you to leave here with, this tank ain't a toy. This tank ain't something that you, and excuse me, I say tank instead of MRAP, but you know, if it walks like a tank, if it rolls like a tank, and it feels like a tank, it's a tank. Anyway, you know, we don't need to be in parades with the tank. This tank is a dangerous military weapon that's been used around the world and now is being used in the United States. And as you sit by your dinner tables and you watch the evening news and you see all over the world, you see the tanks rolling in and all the, it's not all over the world now. It's here in Champaign, Urbana. Now, I know that there was a heavy armored, because I see them doing exercise in front of my house, a heavy armored like truck with SWAT. I know, and that in itself doesn't make military station. There was a drone, and in itself does not mean that we've militarized. There's tasers. There's now a tank. Okay, so we are militarizing our police department. And one of the old expressions that a woman used to say to me, an old woman said to me, you know, honey, when you're old, you don't only just see down the street, you see around the corner. And I believe that what's around the corner, now primarily I also believe that this military weapons will be used first and foremost on the African American community, but I'm not going to speak to that. Other people can speak to that, okay? But I know that last year, when we were talking about programs for the mental health and everybody got excited and we thought you were very progressive, well, not real progressive, but we thought you were getting progressive, and you know, we thought that you cared and that there was going to be a reentry program and that there was going to be a lot of programs that would free the jail up and use less cells, and you cannot. They are diametrically opposed, militarization and social programs. So you have it in your hands to stop this history. You know, you have it in your hands, and hopefully, I probably won't, but we'll all be alive at some point when we look around and say, how did this happen? It happened because you allowed it to happen. Because you allowed your police department, your sheriff's department, to purchase military equipment. So I don't want to see Ferguson in Champaign, Urbana. But you know, if another young black man is killed in Champaign, Urbana, they're going to be something to pay. So I just think that we need to be forward-thinking. I think we need to see what's going to happen, what could happen, and I think that you need to really have an analysis on militarization.
Thank you.
Okay.
Your time is up. Thank you. Ahmed Taha.
Good evening. My name is Ahmed Taha. I live in 2707 Pine Valley in Champaign, and I work for U of I, and I have been in Champaign County for 9 years now. I might have a different experience from many of you, if not most of you, as originally from Egypt, which is currently under the attack of the military coup, and the memory of having artillery and heavy military equipment, cars, and in the streets. This is a very negative picture in my mind and the mind of my children. I have 4 children who were born and grew up in between Virginia, Chicago, and here. So they belong to the society, but they still have the following up with what's happening in my country. It's very negative to find in the streets police and as well the military walking in the streets with the artillery, with the heavy equipment, and very scary. They don't think that this will keep the order on the streets. This will intensify the fear and the feel of insecurity. I think I have been living in the States for the last 18 years, since I came as a graduate student, and I settled. So I feel what the society lives, and myself, I'm an activist. So I'm not isolated at my home. I'm with my children at home or my work, but I know what the society might need, and so establishing the security in the society will not be by the heavy artillery. It will be by social, educational programs, which can educate people, which can instead of investing millions in equipment and increasing the fear in the heart of people, we need to invest these millions in educating the younger generation who's coming, who might have, because of different reasons, in their mind some kind of violent background. We need to educate them to get them better citizens. What I have, all the negative pictures I have from my country back home, I don't like to see it here. I don't like to see it in any city. I don't like for my children to move in the streets and to be afraid of someone who has in hand the power might threaten them. Thank you so much.
Hello, I'm Al Kagan, and I live at 310 West Hill Street in Champaign. I recently retired from the University Library as Professor of Library Administration and African Studies librarian. Thanks very much for the opportunity to address you about militarization of the police tonight. I don't claim any special expertise on this topic, but I do know it's a very bad idea. As you know, the Department of Defense provides military-grade weapons and equipment to local law enforcement agencies through the 1033 program, enacted by Congress in 1997 to expand the practice of dispensing extra military gear. Due to the defense industry's bloated contracts, there is a huge surplus of this gear. To date, the Pentagon has donated military equipment worth more than $4 billion to local law enforcement agencies. We've recently seen this equipment used in several communities nationally, resulting in the death of people who at most were suspected of very minor law infractions. It seems as if the acquisition of such equipment creates an incentive to use it. In other words, the police culture changes and violence results. What kind of a community do we want to live in? I can state a few goals that seem basic to me, and perhaps you will agree. What about abolishing poverty? Providing affordable health care in a healthy environment, providing affordable educational opportunities, providing safe neighborhoods, providing rewarding and satisfying jobs, providing opportunities for people to use their positive creative energy, providing public spaces for arts and culture. In short, for me, this adds up to providing a high quality of life for all. The militarization of the police treats our neighborhoods as if they were combat zones instead of residential homes and local businesses. It is a focus on the negative rather than the positive aspects of life. And contrary to what is advertised, the equipment is not even free. There are many costs involved in procuring and using the so-called surplus equipment. Instead of militarization, government's role must be to provide a positive environment for life. Congressman Hank Johnson of Georgia has proposed the Stop Militarizing Law Enforcement Act to prohibit the transfer to police of high-caliber automatic weapons, armored vehicles, armed drones, aircraft, stun grenades, and silencers. Several national organizations have endorsed the act, including the Friends Committee on National Legislation, that's the Quakers, and the American Civil Liberties Union. I'd like the board to consider endorsing Hank Johnson's view and endorsing his act, as well as the current Citizens for Peace and Justice resolution that was heard a little earlier, and to reject the further militarization of the police. Thank you.
Terry Townsend.
I won't take 5 minutes. Good evening to all of you. And let me just say, first of all, my name is Terry Townsend. I'm born and raised here. I'm a retired public official. County Board appointed me twice to the Housing Authority Board of Commissioners, and I've been asked to go back on that board or another board for 10 years, every year. But I am retired, trying to be retired. I want to thank you for your service, first of all, because it's a difficult job that you do. You're not paid for it. You do it because you think about a better society, a better place to live. I'm here to encourage you to return the MRAP, otherwise known as a mine-resistant ambush protected vehicle, to the federal government. The militarization of local police is not a partisan issue. Republicans and Democrats, both sides of the aisle, members of Congress, are concerned. The militarization of the local police is not a sectional issue. Taxpayers from New York to California are concerned. The militarization of the local police is not a racial issue. It is an American issue, and we should be clear about that. We must equip the police to do their jobs, but we don't have any mines in Champaign County. We don't. We must not be frozen in our positions, Republican or Democrat, when it goes down, when we start talking about policing. We've got to stop and step outside of ourselves. We can ill afford to turn the streets of America into a war zone. I have recently returned from Ferguson, Missouri, and some of you know that I was there during that difficult week and have dealt with this issue for 40 years. And I will return to Ferguson, and hopefully we can resolve a whole lot of issues. But let me be clear. Ferguson, Missouri is the new Birmingham, Alabama. It has informed our young people throughout this country, and the middle class, as well as those that sit at the sideline and call the game from the hot dog stand, are very concerned. Let's just think a minute if the young police officer is not indicted. Many people say that's what will happen, and then Ferguson will burn. And then what will that do to Champaign County? How will that inform our young people? How will that inform you? You cannot go back to business as usual. There is an epidemic throughout America of white police officers shooting African-American kids. I think US Today put it like 1 or 2 every week since 2012. We must act now to de-escalate our problems. Again, there are no mines in Champaign. Davis, California just returned its MRAP. You can do the same thing. You can do what your sister cities do and still give the police what they need to do their jobs. Lastly, I'm from this community. I know about Villa Grove, Ludlow. I know that there are people in the county that are training every day as if we're going to be at war with each other. I know that. So I know the police have to be armed to protect us. But at the same time, we have our youth shooting at each other. We can't even solve that problem. What if it escalates? Difficult days ahead. Don't go back to business as usual. Thank you.
Patricia Avery.
Good evening. My name is Patricia Avery, and I live in Champaign. I don't have any prepared speech. I think you all just heard from a lot of wonderful speakers. And I'm here to also speak on the demilitarization of our police forces. I heard Terry say that he actually went to Ferguson, and he talked about the young people. I actually took 2 carloads of young people to Ferguson, to a rally at a church. They felt compelled to be there. I took the best friend of Keyone Carrington to Ferguson with me. And it made a huge impact. And I wish you all could hear. He is still hurting over the death of his best friend. And I wish you guys could hear the music. He's a contributor in our society. And he made a song, and I wish you all could hear it. It talks about how we can get along. What is it going to take? Is this America? Why do we need this kind of equipment in our communities? If there is a war that has been declared on our communities in America, then we need to tell the citizens of America that we're in a war. Because what we saw in Ferguson, Missouri scared a lot of people. And so they're worried about, now everybody's looking in their arson. What is in our community? We need to know. We didn't know there was an MRAP. I didn't know that the sheriff had an MRAP in his arson. We don't know why we need one. We know there's been a fictitious war on drugs for many, many years, and we haven't won that war yet. But I don't think that we need this kind of equipment in our communities. I also know that I was listening to the news on the way over here, and Congress is worried. Congress will not act. They're skittish, worried about giving arms to the Syrians to fight ISIS. They don't want to make that decision because we know we have armed governments before with weaponry, and they have turned around and used those weapons against us. So they're having a war within themselves right now to decide what to do. So we don't need, now we are giving out extra equipment to communities in our communities across this country. Now we're giving away equipment to use against our own citizens. Not only are we giving it away to would-be allies that turns enemies against us Americans, now we're giving it to ourselves to turn against against ourselves. That is got to be the craziest thing that we have done. We should have found a place to store those that equipment for our real enemies, because we do have them. When did black folks become the enemy? We are not the enemy. So I don't understand why it's necessary for our armed forces to have this kind of equipment. So I would say, I think about this excess equipment that has been given to these agencies as gifts, as Christmas presents. You know, oh, get excited because we've got them. But just like that ugly sweater or that ugly tie that you get at Christmas, and you want to give it back, but you know, you don't know how to do it, but you find a way, you never see it again. Just give it back. And I stand in support of body cams as well. So just think of how quickly we would have been able to resolve some of these problems, these interactions. So I stand in support of our sheriff receiving body cams. Thank you.
John Gilpin. John Gilpin.
My name is John Gilpin. I live at 818 West Columbia in Champaign. My hearing is rather poor. If the point I'm going to make has already been made, I apologize. I'm concerned with the weight of the MRAP. I understand it's about 25 tons. It strikes me as likely that a vehicle of that weight would essentially destroy many of the streets, the side streets of our towns. I do not know what the case is on this. I did address this question by email to both of my district representatives a week or so ago, and I've had no response. I understand that this is not a dialogue situation, and you cannot give me a response now, but it seems to me that an engineer's opinion about this is relevant and that it should be provided to the people of the county. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak in public participation? Would you please come up and then hand us a slip? Just hand it down the end there and we'll pass it along. Thank you. Anyone else wishes to speak, please fill out a slip of paper. Please give us your name and your address, please.
My name is Bobby Trist. I live at 503 North Fair in Champaign, and I usually speak to you on the matter of jails and mental health, but today I'm going to just say a brief word from the Quaker perspective about the militarization of our police departments. The Quakers have a long history of being against war, like 350 years. We have a testimony on peace. And I just see this as the wrong direction for our country to be going, and I'm very concerned that this has come so close to home. And Ferguson is also very close to home. Kewan Carrington was at home. That wasn't with military weapons, but it's just, we're moving in the wrong direction when we're targeting young men who are unarmed, and we're moving in the wrong direction when we're making our police departments who are there to protect us look like a war zone, like they're in Afghanistan or Iraq. So I hope the county board encourages, or I'm not sure exactly what power you have, but to have the county sheriff give back the MRAP. And it's kind of a Trojan horse. These things aren't free. You have to pay for transportation. You have to pay for upkeep. There is an expensive paint job that needed to be done. So it's not quite the gift that it looks like in the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there someone else who wished to speak? This gentleman? You too, sir? Have you filled out a slip? All right, come on up. What slip is this one? Oh, okay. This is for William G. Neat, is it? Bill.
I live in North
Neff.
Mahomet,
Neff? Oh,
Champaign,
it's a Neff,
Illinois.
okay.
And I've had problems with obnoxious weeds on my property due to subdivision that was put in across from me. And it's getting the place, they're getting tall, and they're getting in my yard. I've had to dig them out. They're the type of weed that have got anywhere from 1,500 to 5,000 seeds per bloom on the plant. And I've tried to get something done with it. I realize that it's a law that's been in effect since 1904, and trying to get enforcement with it is kind of hard, but I would like somehow or another for somebody to take the foresight and doing something with this, because it's getting so far out of hand, it's making a mess. I got farm ground that I farm and sell hay off of. Alfalfa hay with thistles in it, nobody will buy it. So I have to put it to grass. Nobody wants grass hay. Then I've got problems with having to continue to spray this. I don't let mine go to seed, but Canadian thistles grow up from the roots and spread like, got crowns on them like carrots. And they just spread all over. And I feel like there needs to be something done to eradicate this problem of some type. And I don't know, I've been told this is I went to the county extension office at the U of I and the one out the Farm Bureau, and I've verified these weeds and showed them to them, and they've turned it back into the county as the ones that they said is responsible for controlling this or taking it under review. And one other thing I'd like to state is we got people that are coming out in the country building homes. They're taking their basement sump pumps and dumping them in the road ditches. The road ditches in the country are made to drain the water off the road. They're not to be soft year-round with water in them. And then people or farm machinery pulls over and gets in it, and it messes it up, and then they call the road commissioner and complain to him. They need to quit. I mean, there's been 2 homes put up in my area in the last 2 months, and they've stuck the sump pumps out in the road. You can't even mow them or nothing. It's nothing but water. So I guess that's all I want to say at this time.
Thank you, sir.
Here's a sample of the Canadian thistles.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what kind of weed that was at first, so I'm
But
glad
it's
I'm
been
glad it's a
over-
noxious weed,
It's been
actually.
over in half, so it's tall.
Thank you. Mr. Is it Zigo? I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your first name, sir. Or I can't read it, actually.
My name is Yaakov Ziso, 903 East Colorado, Urbana. 2 points. One is the concept of militarization, and the other one is the concept of that was described here as far as, well, when people speak about the militarization, so to speak, what I'm thinking of is that someone came, I'm going to describe it very simply. Someone, a salesperson, came here and wanted to sell the specific tank. So he spoke with someone of this board and said, convinced them that that's necessary for our community. They made a description of our community as needing that kind of weapon. They described our community as an escalation that will get to the need to use that weapon. And people who agreed with that person are also party to that escalation of describing our community as something that needs that escalation. That is a very direct concern that I have about people who listen to that salesperson and somehow are now considering that purchase. As to the militarization, I've been in the Israeli army, I've been trained, I signed on weapons, I was trained how to use them, so I know a little bit about what it means to have armament on my torso or on my back. And the person in Ferguson, the policeman, was not an evil person, had a lot of weapons on him. And in that very moment, when he had to make a decision which weapon to use and how, was confused. And in that confusion, he ended up shooting 6 times someone that could have been solved with something else that he had on his torso. So that is, to me, militarization. It's also the fact that someone has a lot of weapons and reaches that one of them and misuses that. So when you provide, as the other gentleman said here, when you provide our police force with those weapons, you provide them with another means of doing something that is completely out of line, is completely inappropriate. We spoke here with the people about the tasers, and I asked the specific question about when people are going to use tasers, whether people in the police were trained of when to use tasers. They were not trained for when, they were trained for how. I rest my case.
Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? All right, thank you. I'm closing public participation. Thank you. Is there any communication from the board? James.
Yes, you'll find at your desk an invitation to the Economic Development Corporation's annual meeting. I wanted to let you all know that I'm intending to get a table, perhaps 2, depending on how many interested people I have at this meeting for the county, both department heads and county board members, to go see what's going on with the EDC. If you are interested in joining me at that meeting, drop me an email, and I'll tell you that the tickets are $35 if you go yourself. If you join me, it's $300 for the table for 10 people, so you get $5 off. So just let me know if you're interested. I need to let them know by next week.
Thanks, James. Any other communications from the board? Okay, thank you. Let's move on. I need a motion to approve the minutes of August 21st, 2014, please. So move Ralph, second Stan. Any discussion on these minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Our next will be presentation quarterly nursing home reports. Scott is, there he is. Okay.
Good evening, everybody. Topics tonight: census, financial position, cash position, and an update on the food service program. Our census in the month of August averaged 207. And you can see that we've had a steady climb through the spring months, and our current census today is 204. So we have seen some pretty strong census numbers so far this summer. Our average year-to-date in 2014 through August is 203. So you can see going back to 2008, our average census is at an all-time high this year. Our Medicare census in the month of August averaged 13.8, and you can see we've seen a somewhat a declining trend through the summer months. And our current Medicare average daily census is running just about 12 or 13, and it has been running in that area over the last few weeks. And the basic reason for that is that the hospital activity or the referrals from the hospital have been low across the board in the county. Our VA census in the month of August averaged 2.9. And our VA census this year is running at about 2.8 so far this year. And so we're having a pretty good year so far with the VA. And again, the majority of the referrals that we are getting from the VA are respite, where they're coming in for a short stay. We are seeing, with our new contract, more referrals for long-term stays also. But again, the bulk of the referrals that we're seeing are for respite care. Our admissions have remained pretty steady. You can see in August, we did have a drop-off with 23, and again, that's because of the reduction in hospital referrals that we're seeing for all the facilities in the county. Our discharges have been fairly moderate for the most part for this year, and we had 18 discharges in the month of August, after a high of 21 for the year in July. Our payer mix in 2014, we're running at 8.8% Medicaid, 33% private pay, which also includes our VA, and 8.2% on our Medicare. And again, last report, I gave you a month-by-month summary of our payer mix, but I purposely left that out because we are, again, continuing to have a high number of conversions of Medicaid, private paid to Medicaid. So in the month of June, we actually had 2,139 conversion days, which equated in the month of June to a net financial adjustment of about $90,000 to $100,000 to our revenue because of that. And again, these are residents who have their Medicaid applications in process for over a year, if not 2 years. And then we finally get paid for those residents. Our financial position on a year-to-date basis through August shows a positive net income, excuse me, of $383,000. Operating revenues are $9.9 million. Operating expenses, $10.2, with non-operating revenue or income of $739,000, which again, the majority of that is the property taxes. If you add back the depreciation expense, the cash from operations is $875,000 year-to-date. On the expense side again, contract nursing through the month of July shows that this year we are seeing an increase in agency use, but hopefully the trend that we've been seeing since March will continue through the rest of the year, is a higher utilization of agency staff. And again, that is primarily due to CNA vacancies, and in particular on the night shift. Our cash position.
Scott, can I jump in?
Chris? Sure.
At one point, my understanding was that local schools that were training CNAs weren't working with the nursing home because the nursing home rating was such that they didn't want to send or were not able to send their students, but yet our rating is going up. Are we at the point or approaching the point where we can begin to work with some of these local educational institutions that are training CNAs?
Yes, that's starting up this fall. With Parkland, and you're gonna have to forgive me, there's another program that the school, that the nursing home has worked with before. So those are in progress. And again, I can't tell you if a class has come through yet or not, but I know it was being planned for this fall.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that, because I think that is something that may actually help us in recruiting, because if we've got people who are exposed to the facility as students, I think they might be more likely to favorably consider working at the facility as opposed to trying to hire people on the open market.
Nope, I agree with that. And we do have LPN classes that do come through Parkland. All right, cash flow from operations, and again, this is net of revenue and expenses without the depreciation expense or backing out the depreciation expense. And you can see 2014, we're having a good year on cash flow. Now, May's numbers you can see is literally off the charts. Again, it's an error on my part in putting together this graph, but in May, we showed about $190,000 $100,000 cash contribution from operations. In June, you can see that we actually had a negative $30,000 cash contribution, and there's a couple of things that were going on in June. One of those is that with the passing of the new collective bargaining agreement, we had to expense the additional wages for 2014. And again, the other big item was the Medicaid pending conversion that obviously took a big hit in the month of June. All right, again, this graph, which you have seen before, shows our cash, accounts receivables, and accounts payables. And you can see the top, or the red line, is our accounts receivables. And we have been able to get our receivables down from about $4.6 million in the month of May down to just under $4 million in the month of July. Our accounts payable are at $1.83 million, and our cash is just under $100,000. So again, you can see the cash has not increased to the level. When I say our cash, I'm sorry, I meant $1 million, yes. Not 100. Thank you, Rachel. So, but I just got done telling you that the cash flow from operations year-to-date through July is $875,000. So the question is, what's going on? Why is our cash balance actually not higher than the $1 million? Two reasons. First is the IGT payments from the state. In September of 2013, our receivables for the IGT was just over $400,000. That receivable is now over $865,000, more than doubled. And that's basically because we are not seeing regular quarterly payments from the state on the IGT. The second issue is the Medicaid pendings. We currently have over 60 of our Medicaid residents in the building currently waiting for their Medicaid applications to be processed. So our average Medicaid census runs about 110, give or take a few. That's more than half of our Medicaids that we're not getting paid the bulk of our room and board. We do collect the resident income, which is the Social Security or their pension checks. But again, the majority of the revenue we are not collecting until we have a month like June where we have some conversion days. And again, on any given month, we're averaging anywhere from 100 to 700 days. And June was just a huge aberration, or you want to call it a catch-up. But again, the delays in processing the Medicaid applications has a direct impact on our cash flow. Food service. The primary focus is on improving the quality of both our dietary supervisors and the quality of our employees. So what we've been working on, or what the Food Service Management Group, Healthcare Services Group, is putting the supervisory team in place. That's number one. So we do have a food service director that's in place. He's been there for a couple of weeks now. We have 2 shift supervisors, one for day shift, one for evening shift, and we now have a full-time registered dietitian. The facility has not had a full-time registered dietitian. We have historically used a consultant dietitian that comes in works a few hours every month to meet the requirements for having a registered dietitian. The dietitian is covered under the cost with Healthcare Services Group, and that individual is there at the facility on a full-time basis. So the focus of the supervisors and the registered dietitian during meal service is for their presence to be in the dining rooms to help increase the supervision during the meal service. So we have the director in the kitchen, and then we have the supervisors and the dietitian in the dining rooms overseeing the food service employees. The Healthcare Service Group corporate support has been at the facility on a full-time basis, but has reduced their time with the hiring of this director in the last 2 weeks. But Jeff is still going to be at the facility at least a couple of days a week for the foreseeable future to provide additional corporate support and assistance with training and education of the staff. The second item besides supervision is the food service workers and the cooks. And so the staffing levels are improving. Our last orientation class last week had 5 new food service workers and cooks and assistant cooks. And the nice thing with that group is we actually had 2 food service workers who are going to be weekend-only employees. So that is a huge, huge help for our dietary department to have additional assistants just on the weekends. The other issue is staff accountability, and that's basically making sure that our kitchen staff is accountable to their daily tasks. And that means that there are checklists that are being checked off on before each employee leaves. They have specific responsibilities every day, and that includes a daily cleaning checklist, sanitation, and also checking the temperatures that the cooks have to do. Cook training is focusing on prep quality, plate presentation, and garnishing. Healthcare Services Group invested in uniforms for the staff, and they provided 2 black polo shirts or 2 aprons for the cooks. And so the uniforms is basically black pants with black polos and a black baseball cap. And the final item of focus is customer service. And that is primarily with the food service workers out in the dining rooms to really get them to know the residents. If there's questions or requests, that they follow up those as quickly as possible. So again, one of the other items that the food service group has invested in is walkie-talkies, so the food service employees don't have to walk back and forth from the dining rooms to the kitchen. So all of these things are probably just the tip of the iceberg on all the issues that Healthcare Services Group is working on. And what I can tell you is that we're making slow, steady progress. I wish I could come here and tell you that everything is 100% perfect, but that is not the case. We are seeing an improvement in the meal delivery times, but the issue there is it's not consistent. So it may be right on time, 2 days in a row, and then on that third day, breakfast is served late. But we are starting to see improvements. The food preparation, you know, there are days when we'll have one of our residents tell Karen to take a look at this pancake. One of the 2 pancakes is perfect, but the second one may be rock hard. So it's things like that. We're trying to hold each employee accountable to their job responsibilities. And again, we're making steady progress, but again, we still have a lot of work that still needs to be done. Questions?
Thank you, Scott. Are there any questions from the board for Scott? Patsy?
I have a question, Scott. I sent you a message concerning explanation of item number 4 on the resolution. Chris Alex said you did respond, but I had already left the house, so I didn't have access to your response. Could you share with everybody what you had sent to me, please?
And I apologize for not responding back to the original email.
That's okay.
And hopefully my email this afternoon answered your question, because it was in regards to the ancillary charges.
Yes,
And
it is.
determining the accuracy of the ancillary charge, or the process for determining the ancillary charges.
Yes.
So the majority of the ancillary charges are for what we call treatments. So that would include if a resident has a wound, the dressing changes, nebulizer treatments or breathing treatments. And any of those items, the nurses will write that down on what is called a treatment log. So copies of those treatment logs are given to Karen, she reviews them, and then they're given to the business office. And then those items are put into the private pay billings.
Okay, may I have a further clarification question? Okay, the way it's stated here is that separate charges shall be billed for medical and personal supplies. So I don't get ancillary services under personal supplies. I question this because I had a mother in the nursing home for 10 years, and this pattern of billing started going into place during that time, and it was a very difficult thing as the person paying the bills and being 2,500 miles away, so I'm interested in how this is being handled.
And
rather
again,
than-
the majority, so we won't charge for a toothbrush or toothpaste, but it's mainly the nursing treatments that we're billing for, or oxygen, things like that, that over and above normal nursing care. So other facilities may charge for different levels of care. So if you require additional assistance with your daily living, if you need more assistance with getting dressed, getting bathed, assistance with feeding, we don't differentiate in terms of level of care, but we do charge extra for treatments.
May I ask Ms. Busey a question then, please? Sure. Is it important, since this is a resolution for charges, that when we get to this resolution, we have a clarification on the wording of number 4 to be accurate? It's on page, let's see, 23. I still have trouble seeing small print.
Well, I mean, the resolution was written by MPA on behalf of the nursing home, so if you don't feel like it provides enough clarification, I would suggest we determine with Scott right now what you think it should say.
Okay, well, if it's services and not supplies, wouldn't it be just as easy to change that?
You
Well-
can change that word if that, in fact, is that accurate, Scott? Is it?
Well,
But some of the services, it is services/supplies. So again, wound care supplies. So if they have a wound care treatment, we're charging them for the dressing changes, for the dressings that are used in the dressing changes, any ointments or specific antibiotic creams that are being used for those wound care. So there are supplies. So we're not charging for the time that the nurses are providing the service. It is for the supplies for those treatments or services.
okay.
All right, thank you. Chris?
I guess we can have this discussion when we take this item up, but I would agree that medical and personal supplies, which is the language that's in the resolution, is not entirely consistent with what you've just said.
I would agree.
Okay. Geraldo?
Did we ever get the back order for the meal carts for the delivery?
Yes, we did.
And the food is now warm when it's delivered to the patient or to our client?
It has improved.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Scott at this time? Jim?
More of a statement. I just wanted to thank you for the report of adding the director and the supervisors. I think it will help improve the dining services, and look forward to further improvement, reports on improvement of dining service and the census because of that improvement. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Scott. I'd like the motion to place. Thank you. Will be the Long-Range Transportation Plan Draft, Sustainable Choices 2040. What? Oh, it's okay. Don't worry about it.
Good evening. We are here today to present the draft of the long-range transportation plan for the Champaign urbanized area. For the last 26 months, the staff at the Regional Planning Commission have been working to develop this plan. This is a plan that is required by federal law. All metropolitan planning organizations in the United States are required to develop or update their long-range transportation plan for their urbanized areas in order to receive transportation planning funds or funding for infrastructure projects. Today we'll be presenting the draft plan to you for review and for comments. Our intention is then to go to the Highway Committee in October to solicit approval or support for the plan, and then bring it back here to the County Board on October 23rd. At the same time, we'll be making presentation to different boards of the members of the QWATs And the document will be going out for 30-day public comment period on, beginning on October 1st until October 31st. Our goal is to get this document approved in December, when it's due to the Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transit Administration. At this time, Ashley McLaughlin will make the presentation, and then we'll be here to answer any questions.
Good evening. So as Rita mentioned, this plan has been in progress for almost 2 years now, and throughout the process, there's a massive amount of data collection. And so my goal tonight is not to give you every piece of data we've collected, but to give you an overview of the plan, and you have access to the full draft document on our website. So throughout the course of the next month and a half, you can review the plan in detail. If you have the time, we appreciate any and all feedback. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a general overview, and then we'll be available for more detailed questions for whatever topics you're interested in. So to begin with some background data, the metropolitan planning area for this plan is defined by the Census and the federal government. So as you can see on this map, the black dotted line is the planning area for the long-range transportation plan. The blue areas are the census-defined urbanized area. And as of 2010, we've added Tolono and Mahomet to our metropolitan planning area for the 25-year planning horizon. These are our county population trends and projections through 2040. This graph starts at 1970 with 163,000 people in the county overall. In 2010, we had right around 200,000, and by 2040, we're projecting 245,000. We do our population projections based on a interregional cohort component model that takes into consideration birth and death data, migration rates, et cetera. At the bottom here, you can see the urban to rural population ratio. About every 10 years, we see a shift in the overall proportion of the population to the urban area. It doesn't mean that the non-urbanized area is not growing or is losing population. It just means that the urbanized area is growing quicker in the county overall. But this plan is just for the metropolitan planning area. It's not for the entire county, as required by federal government. This is a snapshot of our current land use. I just wanted to give you an idea of, in terms of the overall planning area, the majority of the overall planning area is agricultural land. That's the light green color. And so the planning boundary is for what we expect to see in the urbanized area over the next 25 years. So that's why the planning boundary extends a bit further than the current urbanized area. And this is a picture of how the urbanized area has grown over time. The lines in red are the street network from 1914, and as you can see, we've grown outward since then. So as we grow in population and employment, people develop on open land, and that means that has a significant impact on our transportation costs. So with new development, we expect exponential increases in transportation infrastructure as well as resource use and consumption. So in addition to general data collection from national and local data clearinghouses, we did a lot of public involvement for the long-range plan so that we could get an idea of what people want for the future of their community. So over the course of the last 2 years, we implemented a different kind of outreach. We have an outreach bus that's called the Community Conversations Bus. So as opposed to asking people to come to a specific location at a specific time that we determine, we take our bus to different community events where we know people are at, and we talk to them about the long-range plan and get their input on different aspects of the plan. We went to over 29 different community events, and in the previous LRTP, just to give you an example or a comparison, we got fewer than 100 pieces of public input throughout the course of several public meetings. In this go-round, we have over 1,500 pieces of public input, and that's just from our outreach with the bus, not including other forms of input that we implemented. So I'm not going to go through these numbers, but just to give you an idea, as we went out with the bus, we were keeping track of where respondents were coming from in terms of municipality, their race and ethnicity, their age, and their gender to make sure we were getting a representative sample of the population throughout the metropolitan area. And this is just a map of geocoded residences. People could volunteer their information. We didn't require that they give us their home addresses or any of their personal information. We also have an active website. The address is there at the top. We have informational videos on the site that we put together locally, an interactive input map where people can provide comments on any place in the community, event listings for upcoming outreach or public meetings, document drafts, report cards. We do an annual report card for the current LRTP, whatever LRTP is in effect. And we do a report card measuring what kind of progress we've made toward the goals and objectives in that LRTP. And then we also have general information about the federal requirements surrounding the long-range planning process. In addition, we did some social media outreach through Facebook and Twitter. I'm not going to go through this, but we try to update this weekly just to get more people engaged. We did find that it was easier to reach people in the rural area in ways that we haven't been able to reach before through social media. And then a variety of other more traditional public meetings, kickoff meeting, existing conditions meetings. We had a series of 4 visioning meetings where we had a graphic facilitator. That's the picture on the bottom left here. We had a graphic facilitator drawing the conversation live just to engage people and have a public record of what happened at the meeting. In addition, we have agency presentations that took place this June and July and currently September through December. So after collecting a lot of data from the Census and other local clearinghouses, as well as public input, we collected summaries of each of the transportation modes in our community to have an idea of the existing conditions within the transportation network. So overall, this chart on the top shows the commuting mode for workers 16 years and over in the region. I'm not going to go through these numbers in detail, but just in general to point out that workers in Champaign, Urbana, and Urbana have much higher rates of walking, bicycling, or taking public transit, obviously because we have a lot more infrastructure for that than in Savoy, Tolono, or Bondville. And then this graph on the bottom is actually from our public input. This is mode use by age. We ask people how they typically get around the community in a given week. And again, I'm not going to go through these in detail, but just to point out something that was actually somewhat surprising to us was that bicycling, which is the green bar here, was actually a really consistent category at about 15% in every single age group from age 10 to age 80 and up. So on to the specific modes. I'm going to show a screen here for each of the modes. On the left, you see just some general summary of that particular mode. The comments in yellow at the bottom are directly from the public comments that we got during our outreach, and the box on the right is going to be related goals and objectives that we've already established related to our findings listed on the left. So for pedestrians, we have walking to work has increased from 11.6% to 13.1% from 2000 to 2010. Safety is always an issue. Pedestrian vehicle crashes are currently up. And from the public, we heard that they want more, better sidewalk access and connectivity. So people pointed out specific areas of the community where they were forced to walk in the street if there wasn't a sidewalk in place or if the sidewalk was in poor condition. In addition, street lighting was another reason that people often cited for not using the sidewalk or not walking. I'm not going to go through the goals and objectives in detail, but those are from chapter 10, I believe, in the draft document that's online. In terms of bicycles, biking to work has also increased from 2.5% to 3.6% from 2000 to 2010. And in general, people asked for more bike infrastructure for better connectivity and more safety education for all road users. So for cars and bicyclists alike, more education about how to safely and legally share the road with all modes. In terms of buses and public transit, CUMTD ridership has increased by 2.4 million rides between 2007 and 2012. That's the small graph there on the bottom. The service area does not currently match the urbanized area, so there are pockets of the urbanized area that aren't serviced by CUMTD. And in general, people said they wanted longer service hours, higher frequency, more direct routes, and safer bus stops. So I will also mention that that's a lot of demands. But people in general talked a lot about the bus. We got by far more comments about the bus than any other mode, and we also got by far more positive comments about the bus than any other mode. So it's an asset in our community that a lot of people appreciate. In terms of cars, implementing more complete streets to more effectively serve all modes is a goal for CUATs and our member agencies. Currently, crashes per 100 million vehicle miles traveled are below state targets, which is good. And there's not a lot of congestion in this area, as you all know, but when people talked about cars, they talked about too much congestion on North Prospect, which I'm sure we're all familiar with. And in terms of trains, rail use is growing. Here's another graph for you on the bottom right there of Amtrak ridership. In 2000, it was right about 75,000 riders per year, and in 2012, we're at about 175,000. One of the goals of this plan is to get a freight plan in place to identify rail and truck needs. This is both for commuters, but also for local businesses to more effectively service businesses and commuters regionally. And the vast majority of people that talked about trains when we did our public outreach talked about wanting a high-speed rail corridor to Chicago. So a lot of people travel to Chicago, they really appreciate Amtrak. But since there's so much back and forth between Chicago, we got a lot of feedback on high-speed rail, making that connection more efficient. And in terms of planes, air travel at Willard has decreased since 2006. The percent of delayed flights is down 50% since 2003, which is good. And by and large, people want more flights to bigger hubs. So people miss the options that they used to have at Willard. And we're not making a lot of specific goals or objectives related to air travel at this point. We are pending the results of the Willard Task Force, and will support their findings since they have been looking into this issue more specifically over the past several months.
I just wanted to say on that issue, what has happened is the consolidation of airlines across the country, which puts us at a disadvantage because there are only two airlines now that service small hubs, and that's United and American. And they have worked out a deal that so that there's no competition between them, so to split the hubs between them. And so it's become very difficult to find an airline besides, let's say, American coming in here to Champaign versus United, who probably doesn't want to have the competition in other hubs. So that's one of the concerns that we have in air travel.
Thank you. So after establishing the existing conditions in the community and collecting a lot of data, how do we plan for the future? The planning horizon in this required document is 25 years. And this is a summary of the steps that we've taken to kind of consolidate and analyze that data. We did, like I mentioned before, we did 4 public visioning meetings in different parts of the community. So we focused on youth, business developers, the general public, and service providers in the rural community. We established, as a result of that, planning pillars that are kind of guiding themes for our entire document that summarize a lot of the public input and results that we found in the existing conditions data. We got input from the agencies involved, and so they each provided projects that they wanted to see happen over the 25-year planning horizon. We also have in our office a series of statistical models that help us project how different development is going to impact the community over the planning horizon. And reference studies. Of course, every municipality within our study area and within our member agencies has relevant plans to this plan. And so we considered a lot of different plans that are already in place, that already have recommendations that we then were able to incorporate into our larger vision to coordinate all of these different plans within this one planning area. So our 4 visioning meetings, as I mentioned, we talked with the public, business developers, youth, and social service employees. And the main questions we were asking were, where will we be in 2040 if we do nothing? And what would you like to see for your community in 2040? So we talked a lot about if there was any disconnect between those two things and how we could move forward in order to become the community we want to be in 2040. And like I mentioned before, we had a graphic facilitator at those meetings. So that's what this poster at the bottom is. It's a summary of the conversation that happened at one of the meetings, which was the public meeting in November. And these are our planning pillars that resulted as a summary of all of the public input and the data collection through the existing conditions work. The first one is safety and security. The second one is balanced development. Third is multimodal connectivity. Fourth is accessibility and affordability. Fifth is healthy neighborhoods. And sixth is resilient economy. In the draft document, there is a chapter dedicated to kind of fleshing these different themes out and talking a little bit more in depth about what they each mean within the planning region and within transportation planning. Next, we got agency input. So this is a list, I know you can't read it, it's just illustrative. This is a list of all of the projects that we received from the member agencies in the planning area that they would like to see happen over the 25-year planning horizon. They're broken up into different timeframes, and then we had members of the public vote on those projects during one of the rounds of our outreach. And so they were able to then tell us which 3 projects they thought were most important over the planning horizon to get an idea of how well the public or the agency priorities lined up with the public priorities. Our statistical models, I'm not going to go into these in depth either, but just to give you an idea of what we measure, we do population and employment projections, land use change and impact projections, travel demand model, which helps us evaluate congestion given different types of development. Mobile source emissions helps us keep track of what our emissions and air quality are going to look like in the future. Social cost of land development looks at how infrastructure costs will change into the future given different types of development. Those are all at the county level, and then we have 2 local level models, the health impact assessment and the local accessibility and mobility assessment. And just to take one step back, these charts on the bottom left give a very summarized output of some of these models. And what we did was to develop 2 different scenarios going forward. We have our baseline data from 2010, and then we have a traditional development for 2040 scenario, which basically, if you can remember the growth map I showed earlier where there was a lot of peripheral development, it takes the approach that all of the future growth, population and employment growth, most of it will happen on the periphery, as has happened in the past. And then we have a Sustainable Choices 2040 scenario, which takes a different approach and focuses more of the development on redevelopment and infill development in order to preserve infrastructure costs and improve safety and mobility within the core area of the community. I also wanted to touch on our last local level models. One of the new things we're doing in this plan is taking population health into consideration. So this map here on the bottom left gives a very general summary of our health index for the community. As you can see, these colors, these darker colors indicate higher accessibility to different health indicators. So greater ease of walking to work, or greater access to grocery stores, greater access to bike paths, greater access to healthcare facilities. So we tried to overlay a lot of different health indicators with the transportation network to have a better idea of the relationship between the two and how we as transportation planners can actually have a positive impact on population health. The most obvious correlation here is active transportation. This is a general map, actually a global map, sorry, that's all on the screen now, of the relationship between walking, biking, and transit, which are all active modes of transportation, and obesity. So as you can see on the left, with much higher rates of walking, biking, and transit, the obesity rate is much lower because people have a lot more minutes of daily activity in their day, of physical activity. And all the way on the right is the US with very low rates of walking, biking, and transit, and very high rates of obesity. So just to give you a very simple, straightforward picture of what this relationship looks like between transportation and population health. I also referenced existing plans. So one of the existing plans we looked at, of course, was the previous LRTP. These are the vision projects from the previous LRTP, which was in 2035. And the projects in blue are not yet funded. The projects in green have been completed. The projects in yellow are currently in progress. And then there's a couple projects in red and orange. One is a preservation corridor and one is a corridor study that also haven't been, well, are both kind of ongoing projects. So just to give you an idea, some of these lines can be misleading. The major highways are in green because one of the goals from the LRTP 2035 was to promote our interstate connectivity and increase transit options to different regions. And then the high-speed rail corridor right through the middle is also in green because we completed a feasibility toward getting a high-speed rail network, but there is obviously a long way to go before that actually is implemented. So now to give you the last portion of our plan, which is the LRTP 2040 vision, some of our project maps and our funding summary. This is our kind of entire vision summary. It has three main aspects. Here in the core community, we're really focusing on high-capacity transit, complete streets that accommodate bicycles, pedestrians, and buses as well. So in this green part, what we heard from the public input and what we've seen from our models is that increasing accessibility in general for all users is going to positively impact our community into the future. On the outside here, we have an enhanced arterial system that focuses more on mobility, so getting places quicker, whether you're in a car or on a bike. And then we also have regional connectivity for Willard Airport, the high-speed rail corridor, and also our regional connections through rails to trails and other interstates. So breaking this down by mode, this is our pedestrian and bicycle vision. These are all projects that have been taken from other plans. This is our busiest map, so not to overwhelm you, I'm not going to go through all of these different projects. There's actually over 700 of them. What we've done is taken all of the bicycle and pedestrian.
Sorry, we have time, 700?
Yeah, I'm sure you'd all love to stay here. What we've done is taken these from the Greenways and Trails Plan for the county and all of the different agencies that also have bicycle and pedestrian visions, and they're all consolidated within this plan for the future. It's a slightly closer shot there. In terms of transit, rail, and air, we have 7 main priorities. I'm going to go ahead and zoom into the urbanized area because that's where they mostly are. The first one is the high-speed rail corridor. As I mentioned, obviously there's a lot of steps that need to happen before that can be implemented, but we are proposing, continuing that energy and moving that project forward through the next studies that need to happen. Secondly, increased Amtrak frequency to accommodate the increase in regional transport. Third is a high-capacity transit network. CUMTD recently received a significant federal grant to implement these streets right here. It hasn't been appropriated yet, but the money has been approved, so it's on our map to do a high-capacity transit network on those streets that are listed there: Green, Armory, White, and Wright Street. Number 4, CUMTD has proposed transit hubs in strategic locations around the area to make service in those locations more efficient and to facilitate more direct routes. Number 5, I mentioned earlier that the CUMTD service area is not currently coterminous with the urbanized area, and so we propose doing that so that the entire urbanized area can be serviced by CUMTD. Number 6 is the Illinois terminal expansion. We would like to see that multimodal hub expanded into the future to accommodate the increasing rail and transit traffic, and also potentially be a resource for other downtown corporate needs, business needs, retail needs. And then the last one, Willard Airport. Like I said, we don't have a specific goal for our Willard Airport. That's pending the findings of the task force. For our 2040 roadway vision, there's a lot of projects on here. I'm not going to go through them one by one. You have the draft document, so you can look at them in greater detail. I'm just going to point out a couple general things. The enhanced arterial referenced in the overall vision is here in blue and yellow. A lot of these projects are carryovers from the 2035 plan, and then the yellow ones are still in progress. The ones in the center here are red ones. These are taken from the priority list that we got from the different agencies. These are actually the projects that were received the most votes from the public. They all have to do with complete streets and increasing pedestrian, bike, and transit access in the core area. And then in addition, we have our CUMTD high-frequency transit in green there. And then we've also included some of the plans from the Mahomet Master Transportation Plan. Mahomet is in our planning area, but they're not within our urbanized area funding jurisdiction. And so those projects haven't been voted on publicly. They're not part of our previous plan, but we're including them because those projects came out of their planning process and they are part of our larger planning area. It's a closer view of the roadway vision. And then on a more immediate level, we have fiscally constrained projects. So it's also our responsibility to keep track of all of the federally funded roadway projects that happen in our area for the next 4 fiscal years. So it's called the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Projects. For fiscal year 15 through 18, we have them all mapped here so that you know which projects actually currently have funding and are slated to happen. Currently, the total for the TIP projects through fiscal year 2018 is $145 million. And again, I'm not going to go through all of these projects, but you can see them in greater detail in the plan or in our publicly accessible TIP document. And then in addition, we have another fiscally constrained map for pedestrian and bike projects as well. In terms of funding, projecting funding for the next 25 years is not a very precise science, but based on current trends and current funding levels and what we anticipate in the future, we got growth rates from each of the agencies we work with, and we projected what revenues and expenditures we expect to see in the future. They're summarized here. I'm just going to point out that the expenditures are quite a bit lower than the revenues because we can project revenues, but we can't actually project expenditures past the 4 years that we know from our TIP document that we know are going to be spent because those monies are secured. And then the asterisk there is just in reference to the CUMTD grant that I mentioned already. Those funds have been approved but not yet appropriated. So they're on the TIP, but, or they're not on the TIP or the funding chart, but we are aware of them. So the next steps are to continue with our agency presentations, continue to get feedback from all of the different agencies that are involved. And then this document will go out for public comment for the month of October. We'll have it in different public locations. We'll also have it online on various websites for people to provide comments. And we're hoping for a final approval in December. So at this point, I would like to take any
Thank you, Ashley.
questions.
I just want to say that this is a lot of work that you've done over there at RPC, and I want to thank you for this. This is quite a report. Do we have any questions for, let's start with Astrid. Astrid, get your microphone, please.
Early on, that was a lot of maps.
Yeah.
But early on, what you showed us was an increase in population of 10% and an increase of urbanized area double, at least double. It seems to me if you're going to, what you do affects what becomes urbanized. And for you to be providing services on the assumption that we're going to have that level of sprawl is maybe not productive. That it might be better to have more services in the areas that are urban rather than luring people outside.
Well, that's what we are proposing, basically to concentrate the population in the core area of the community. If you can point out the map where you saw the growth.
Probably
the historical map, or?
It was early on, but even this one.
Yeah, the historical map.
It shows,
That one?
you know, a very big urban area for a very small increase in population.
Well, this is just the historical growth that we have had in the Champaign-Urbana area. Here, we are not projecting anything. This is the reality of what has happened since 1915, basically. Then this is nothing that we are proposing. This is reality.
Patsy, did you raise your hand?
Yes, I do. Hi, thanks for being here. I've heard the presentation a number of times and never had a chance to present my inquiries and concerns. One of them I would like to build on what Astrid just brought to your attention. And we do know from planning practice that when a boundary is set, out in the hinterland. It's like feeding the goat for sprawl. So I am pleased to hear that you did have a second scenario with infill, because I can't speak for Urbana, but we do know in Champaign, we have enough space within the present boundaries for development for the next 20 years. So when people see this map and they see these boundaries with all of this space, the immediate reaction is what Unit 4 is doing in buying 80 acres north of I-74. So I would encourage somewhere along the line in this document, some emphasis or discussion maybe on your second scenario or something to put a little bit of curtailing on that.
Okay.
This feeds into another concern I have, which we know from transportation practice, and that is you have sort of a emphasis, or not emphasis, a picture about a potential ring road.
You call it ring road.
Well,
Enhanced arterial.
Oh, well, it's a ring road. And I keep referring people to watch what happened in Green Bay, Wisconsin, when they built the first ring road and it became Noah's Ark. We had Walmart here and a Walmart there, and then development, and now the second ring road. So that folds back into where these boundaries are and this picture, and then people have, this becomes institutionalized in what people are thinking about.
Do you want me to give you my perspective
Yeah,
on having that?
absolutely.
Basically, what we are proposing is improving those roadways. We are not proposing on creating 5-lane roadways. For example, on Staley, we already have development there, and Judah Christian is going there. And in the last year, we have a fatality on Staley, no, Rising. We already had a fatality on Rising because safety concerns that we have on that roadway. That is improving the roadway to make it safer and to allow for a better movement of the vehicles. The other roadways are Curtis Road, that is the connection to the interchange on 57, and Olympian Drive, that is the connection to 57. And on the east side is Illinois 130, that at this time is the boundary of Urbana. Then it's basically what we are doing is improving safety, and at the same time that we are improving safety, we are proposing all these roadways to have also pedestrian and bike facilities. That is not just for the cars, are for everybody, all the modes.
Okay, if it is done in more of a complete street mode, that would be useful, and thanks for explaining
Yes.
that. And then my last comment is, when you talked about walkability and the comments that people made, and that they wanted more street lighting. Street lighting doesn't illuminate sidewalks. So are you sure that's what people said, or do they not realize that they walk in the streets because the sidewalks aren't illuminated? And
My guess is what they want is to have enough lighting that they can walk safely on the street. That's what we heard from people.
on the street?
On the street, they want to walk on the sidewalk, but they say on the street is out there, not in their houses, out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Jim?
Sure. I guess I'll start by agreeing somewhat with infill and mass transit and bicycling in the city, and we've seen some great growth in downtown Champaign. Of course, we have thousands of students at the university traveling through Champaign. But I just wonder about the growth that's happening in Mahomet, and that if that hasn't been a lot of the growth that we see there and in Tolono. I'm afraid that if we're focusing so much on mass transit and those types of issues, if in the future we're not going to see a problem with our transportation between places like Mahomet and Tolono, and that we won't see problems with people that are traveling to Carl or to the university to work if we don't at least address those issues. So I want to see that in this plan. You've talked about it more tonight than you did the other day.
I
So-
agree with you. We have some limitations on touching that issue. Mahomet is outside of the urbanized area. For being outside of the urbanized area, we cannot make decisions regarding what happened in Mahomet. What we do is we follow their plans. And regarding transit, there are two different federal requirements for urbanized area and for rural areas. The funding provided for the urbanized area is for MTD to provide, CUMTD to provide service inside the urbanized area. As I mentioned, Mahomet is not in the urbanized area. That's why we have the rural transportation provider providing service in the rural area since 2011. And that's the provider that is providing service to Tolono and Mahomet. Regarding Tolono, just became part of the urbanized area 2 years ago. We are working with them. They haven't come to the table to get input from them about how they want to move forward implementing transportation improvements. Our hope is that in the future, CUMTD can provide service to Mahomet, but there is a long distance there between Champaign Urbana and Tolono that is not urbanized. Then there are some limitations for CUMTD due to the federal requirements to be able to send buses to Tolono to provide that service. But once they become more urbanized, then
I was speaking more to road improvements and.
roadway improvements?
Yes.
In terms of roadway improvement, with Mahomet, we have the same situation. We cannot decide about the roadway projects that they can put in place because they are not part of the urbanized area. That's why we are taking into consideration the projects that they are proposing in the plan that they are developing at this time. Regarding Tolono, as I mentioned, we have been trying to work with them, and they haven't come to the table to discuss the projects that we want to implement on that area. That's why we are not proposing projects there. We are not making decisions for them. We have sent letters, we have called them, and they haven't come to the table yet. We went there with the conversational bus for the LRTP, and we got input from some of the residents.
Geraldo.
Yes, Reed, I wanted to commend you and the staff of RPC and all those that have worked at the long-term range plan for 2040, which I think is very ambitious, but at least we have something on paper that we can look forward to. So I commend you and the staff that have worked on it and the many citizens of the county that have also participated. My interest was also, which at the end you gave a little bit of the rail trails. I thought that was very interesting, and I wanted to see it on there, and that was going to be one of my questions, and you already had included this rail trail from Mohammed to Champaign, which is, again, depending on the finances that we could gather and mustered up. Also, you had another arrow that went from Urbana to Danville and to the state parks as well, and that was something I know that economic development and building up the interest of nature and getting people to walk and ride bicycles was being talked about, as well as it was the Lincoln Trail from Danville to Illinois as a means to sell the county and sell the community. So I think it was a job well done and excellent. So my ideas were included, so thank
Okay,
you.
great.
Any other questions at this point? Okay. Thank you very much. We really
Thank you.
appreciate you coming.
Thank you so
Thanks for all
much.
the work, guys. Thanks for all the work. I'd like to take a motion do we want to place this on file? As the, I got a move in a second. Stan and is it James, right? Is that your James? James and James. Right, okay. I was gonna, James. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. All right, standing committees. Let's move on. Facilities, Stan, and what do you have? Anything besides the summary?
Mr. Chair, everything everybody needs to know is on page 13.
Thank you. Environment, land use. Ralph?
We've got one item. We have one item on the consent agenda. It's a rezoning out on 74, and that's it.
All right, thank you. Lorraine, Highway.
Highway did not have a meeting this month because of lack of quorum, but I see the county engineer is here. I don't know what he had. Nothing? Oh, okay, then.
All right,
So
we
there's
hope to have a
nothing for
quorum
board.
next month. Okay. Let's move on to finance. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move adoption of resolution number 8983, payment of claims authorization.
Second.
Second by James. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move adoption of resolution number 8985 for purchases not following the purchasing policy.
Have a second, Lorraine. Any discussion?
Just to note, there is an updated list at your desk tonight of those purchases.
Thank you, Deb. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move adoption of resolution number 8986 regarding charges at the Champaign County Nursing Home.
Second by Josh. Any discussion? Chris?
Yeah, I mean, this is the one we had the wording question about, and is Mr. Gima still here? He is not. I mean, Deb, how do you?
Yeah.
I don't want to try to legislate this on the fly, but I do have a concern that services is omitted from that language.
Yeah, I would agree if the services are not services that are included in the daily charges, and I think there are additional services that are not. So if you wanted to amend it to services and supplies, that would probably be logical.
Okay, I would make a motion to add, I believe the current language is medical and personal supplies. Is that correct? I would add to that medical and personal supplies and services.
Yes.
As an amendment.
That sounds good. All right. I need a second on that. James on the second.
And I'm open to suggestions for improving the
Any other
wording.
suggestions or discussions on that change? Aaron?
I don't know. You said and or maybe. Very minor. I don't know if that would be a little bit better.
And or services?
Medical and personal supplies and services? Because it is and, because we can do either of them. Yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion on that change? Okay, let's vote on that. Patsy? Patsy, I couldn't hear you. What'd you say?
Change from medical and personal supplies to medical and personal supplies and services?
Okay.
Does that work?
Yeah. Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion carries on that change. Let's go to the main motion now. We have a second already. Do we have any discussion on the main motion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. You'll make the changes, and I'll re-sign the... Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move adoption of ordinance number 948, providing for the issue of not to exceed $12 million general obligation refunding bonds, the public safety sales tax alternate revenue source, the purpose of refunding certain outstanding bonds of the county and providing for the levy of a direct annual tax sufficient to pay the principal and interest on said bonds, and I would ask to speak to that.
I need a second first. Second by Ralph. Chris, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, briefly, I wanted to address a question that Ms. Petrie asked during the Democratic caucus about savings and about timing. And I'd refer the board back to the presentation that was given by Elizabeth Hennessy on August 12th. Page 11 of that presentation lists anticipated savings based on current market conditions of $1.884 million. And page 22, which is the schedule, indicates that the county board at the September 18th board meeting, that being today, would approve the parameters of the bond ordinance authorizing refunding, assuming market conditions are appropriate, with the final pricing to be done in October, and the decision to be made based on the word of the board chair and the county administrator as the designated representatives. This would happen, it would be expected to happen sometime in October. So the answer is we don't know exactly what the savings are going to be at this point until we know what interest rate we are given for the bonds. However, if the market conditions are such that it would not be favorable to refinance the bonds, we will in fact not refinance the bonds.
Okay. Rachel? I have a question. Go ahead,
Well,
Rachel.
no, just to point out, because I was concerned that there are too many blanks in the document, but Deb showed me that on page 24, it says that she, well, it doesn't say she, but basically it would be she. She will not approve that sale unless we save at least 3% of, so that's the only saving grace. I think other than that, we have a lot of blanks that we're signing, and I think we're going to hear a little bit more about that. But basically, we're approving a bond that's going to have an interest rate not to exceed 5%.
Right.
Even though it will not be 5%, but what we're approving is not to exceed 5%. And it will not be able to be refunded before 2025. So it is what it is, and the expectation is to have at least 3% savings, or else we won't do that. But we do need to be aware of what we're approving.
Deb, you want to speak to?
And I just wanted to point out that Elizabeth Hennessy from William Blair and Linda Givens from Chapman and Cutler, who is our bond counsel for this issue, are both here this evening. So if you have additional questions, they are here to address them.
All right, Patsy. Hi, do you want to speak to them?
Yes.
Okay, would you please
If you
step up to
don't
the table and turn on the microphone so that you can respond on air? Thank you.
Thank you for coming and sitting here for such a long time, so I'll take advantage of your doing that. At the present financial situation here in the United States and what Dr. Yellen said the other day about interest rates, do you think that our percentage chance of being able to improve our saving by 3% is a realistic goal for us?
Yes, the savings ratio in the resolution is a minimum of 3%, so it must be over that, and right now it is quite a bit over that. So, and the good news about her statements were that interest rates will stay low, so I think we're in good shape.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, Rachel?
I would just ask, I mean, because we talked in private, but I would like for you to state more clearly, because we have a really long document that has a lot of blanks, and I don't feel comfortable carrying out our due diligence as public officials with voting on so many blanks without very specifics of what we're voting on. So if you can clarify. Thank you.
Yes. First of all, thank you for having us this evening. Actually, earlier in your remarks, you outlined the parameters quite well. The maximum principal amount of the bonds that's being authorized is $12 million. The maximum principal amount that will come due in any 1 year is $2.4 million. The maximum interest rate in any 1 year is 5%. And as you indicated, probably the most important parameter is the minimum savings target of 3%. So although this is a long document and has a lot of words in it, those are really the key provisions. And at the time of the bond sale, assuming appropriate market conditions, what you're doing tonight is delegating the authority to approve the final terms of the bonds to the chairman of the county board and to your county administrator. And unless the provisions of this ordinance are met to a T, then they will not have the authority to proceed with the bond sale.
Go ahead, Rachel. Yes,
One more thing, when we have on page 30, the taxes that will be levied, if you can just clarify that these are the taxes that are currently levied before the refunding, but we don't really expect to levy them because we do expect to have savings, because it doesn't read that way, or at least not to a layman.
Yes. The levies in the document reflect the current levies, and as a parameters resolution and as a maximum, there's no way the levies would be any greater than that. They're going to be less than that. So that's why we use the actual levies as the maximum parameter.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Oh, I was going to say, and then once the bonds are sold, the documents that are signed will abate the levies by the amount of the savings.
Okay. Deb?
I just have one clerical correction to point out to the board. On page 5 of the document, it refers to the fiscal year, and that has been amended to reflect January 1st as the beginning and December 31st as the ending.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have any other? What's that, Chris? Yeah, I know. I just want to see if there's any other discussion. Okay, we need a roll call vote, please.
Jay? Yes. Langenheim? Yes. Maxwell? Yes. McGuire? Yes. Michaels?
Yes.
Mitchell?
Yes.
Petrie?
Yes.
Quisenberry?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Rosales?
Yes.
Schwartz? Schrader?
Yes.
Alex?
Yes.
Bergson? Cowart? Esri?
Yes.
Harper?
Yes.
Harkey?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Kurtz?
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you very much, ladies. We appreciate you coming out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now move on to adoption. I move adoption of resolution number 8987, authorizing the cancellation of the appropriate certificate of purchase on a mobile home permanent parcel number 15-025-0424. Adoption of resolution number 8988, authorizing the cancellation of the appropriate certificate of purchase on a mobile home permanent parcel number 15-025-0230. Adoption of resolution number 8989, authorizing the county board chair to assign a mobile home tax sale certificate of purchase, permanent parcel number 140190015. And adoption of resolution number 8990, authorizing the execution of a deed of conveyance of the county's interest or cancellation of the appropriate certificate of purchase on real estate for permanent parcel number 2000902211014 in omnibus fashion.
I have a second by John. Thank you. Any discussion on those as an omnibus? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move adoption of resolution number 8991, authorizing the schedule of authorized positions for the problem-solving court fund.
Have a second, please. I'm sorry. With second, Josh. All right, discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Roll call.
Roll call. Jeff, would you like to speak to this? Judge Ford, would you come up?
Protocol, there's a few things I think the board may want to know.
Please. What's that?
If you don't know, and I don't want to waste your time.
No, you're not wasting time. This is a very important issue.
I'm Judge Ford, I'm Jeff Ford.
Well, you got to speak into the microphone, Jeff, please.
This is my 30th year on the bench, so hopefully all of you know who I am. I wanted to let you know what's coming down the road statewide, okay? Because this is going to affect some of the things you do now and in the future. I've been pushing for this since 2005 to get a statewide coordinator. It was drug court coordinator back then. There's been more than just drug courts now. Illinois is the last state in the nation to get a coordinator. And they're starting on working on drug courts, okay? So we finally got one. I know this stuff because Justice Garmon appointed me to the Supreme Court Special Advisory Committee on Mental Health and Justice, which is dealing with this. I've been involved in writing Supreme Court rules involving these courts and due process. When we were about ready to start adopting that, the Supreme Court decided to take a step back, which is about a year ago, and work towards standards and certifications. We're starting with drug courts in the state of Illinois. So the first thing we did is we went out and looked nationally. We've looked at numerous states that have these already. I brought one with me because I've been working on it. Surprisingly, some of the better states are Utah and Idaho, okay? Which kind of, I was working on Maryland and I started reading these other ones and thought, wow. I have a feeling our Supreme Court is going to come down with standards and certification because we have a coordinator now who's been working on that. And probably in the next 6 months or so, we are going to have standards for drug courts in Illinois, and you're going to have to be certified to have a drug court, okay? And this goes with the coordinator position. In 4.5 of the Utah standards, part of it says staffings, which is the team staffings, because we talk about everybody beforehand, shall include the active participation of 1, the judge, 2, the coordinator, 3, probation officer, 4, prosecutor, 5, defense counsel, treatment provider, and law enforcement representative. This appears to me to be saying if you're going to have a drug court, you need these people on your staff. Because this is in bold letters, and bold letters are the standards that you have to have, and it says shall have. So this is coming down the pike. We started our drug court without a coordinator. Some of us kind of shared the duties. Since we've had, and this is Del Ryan, and he's our coordinator right now, we have basically gone from the 20th century to the 21st century. We are providing so much more services to get better results and better graduation rates from the population we're serving. More job opportunities, more funding of rewards, and rewards are very big in getting people to change their behavior. More people know about us. The word has gotten out. If you look on the county website, you'll see our website. Dell's got that all together. I mean, he does so much that the only way I can tell you about how much we need a coordinator is take Deb Busey and the gentleman sitting behind you out of here, and as if they didn't exist, you'd have a hard time getting along without them. And that's what we need now. And nationwide, everybody is saying you need a coordinator, and I now understand why. Working so long without one, we're going to have much better graduation rates as long as we can keep what we have going. And I'm not here to talk about the law enforcement personnel, because the sheriff has agreed that as long as we've got somebody who wants to do it, he'll put forward the quarter time. But even the participants in drug court love our law enforcement person. Basically, they say he keeps us monitored. We feel safe when he's around. And as I've told the chiefs, we are now doing community policing at its best. I have multiple convicted felons, long-term drug addicts, going to a uniformed police officer and asking for help. I'm getting trust between the communities, which I think if we would have had more of, some of these incidents that the people talked about earlier never would have happened. So we're making that work. And I just wanted to let you know that this is some of the stuff coming down the pike statewide, and it's going on nationally, and we're trying to stay at the forefront of it. So I don't want to take up your time. If you had any questions, I mean, we're here, so.
Judge Ford has had one of the most successful drug courts in not only the state, in the nation, and he's been given numerous awards for the work that he has done with this entire organization that works to the safety of our community. I can't tell you how much safer our community is when you look back over the years of this program on how many, literally hundreds of felons have changed their ways and have made this community much safer because of their efforts. I have to ask you to look to your constituents for their safety. This program is one of those key programs that works for our community, saves us money in the long run because of of not having to put these people in jail, but having them to become upstanding citizens in our community, paying taxes, working, reuniting with their families, and being part of our community again. And I tell you right now, I ask you to support this resolution. Any other discussion? Patsy, and then John.
Again, thank you to you two for
Well, thank
staying
you.
through a long evening. And this is a question that I'm going to ask of the other departments who are proposing to add personnel. And so do you have some suggestions and ideas how we're going to budget to pay for this additional role?
It's not really. What's that? No, he's correct. Yeah, you're correct, Josh. We are on a roll call. So I apologize. We're not going to have any further question and answer, and I shouldn't have made my statement as well. We're going to need to, by Robert's rules, make that roll call. So I'll need a roll call vote on this issue.
Jay?
Please. Yes for passage.
Jay?
What's that? Yeah, hold on a second.
rules and have further discussion.
What is it?
I'll move to,
You want to
can I
suspend the
move to
rules? All right.
suspend the rules?
Rachel, suspending the, motion to suspend the rules. Give me a second. Second, Geraldo. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. All right, let's go back to discussion. John, Patsy, would you want to continue your discussion, please?
Well, I've asked
Do you wanna
my
answer that question?
inquiry. If you can now answer it, that would be helpful.
Okay, I'm not sure your funding streams. I can tell you that we've calculated that in incarceration costs statewide, we've saved probably $1.5 million since we started. I believe that by keeping people in the community, we're going to save more. And if I can give you one example, we graduated a number of years ago, a lady who had given birth to a child who had the highest cocaine amount in its system in the history of Champaign County. She was pregnant in drug court, and she gave birth to a drug-free baby. So we need to start calculating the cost of the premature birth if this child would have been born with cocaine in its system, the costs of the emergency room, the nurses, the hospital stay for this baby. We would have to calculate the DCFS involvement, the starting of a juvenile abuse neglect case, which has to be done with a baby born with drugs in the system in Champaign County. We would have monthly court hearings on this family. We would have to have a public defender and a state's attorney involved. Depending on how many fathers are involved, we may have to appoint other attorneys to pay for them. We would have, of course, DCFS involved for years with this child. If the child has learning disabilities or other things because of the cocaine use, then there's going to be special services in the schools for this child. Because of the drugs in its system and these things, the child might be behind, might not be. Normally, high-risk children who are involved in this are behind in school. A lot of times they're recognized as high risk. They end up getting in trouble. So I don't know how we calculate the savings of this child being born without drugs in the system, which would have happened if she wasn't successful in drug court. I mean, we're talking about spending pennies to save not just dollars. So I don't know where the money comes from. I'm just saying that if we don't have a sustainable, successful drug court with the proper people in there, it's a loss for this county because you just want to save some pennies now, but down the road, and I'm talking about one person of over 200 that has now graduated from drug court. I can't quantify that. I don't have the economics and the finance background to say how much we're saving by saving that one child. And that is not even a child that went through drug court. Oh, he did because he was in utero most of the time, but I just don't know how I can answer that question for you.
Patsy?
A follow-up then. I understand your argument perfectly. You're talking about the externalities. I understand that. However, when we balance these things and we judge about them, I mean, we had to balance some things when it came to the reentry program, and we know how much that helps save things. So as we make these decisions, I'm looking for the entities who are asking for these to also come to the table and present to us ways and means that they can work from their budget to contribute to what you're asking us to establish here, and I'm not hearing that.
Can I answer that? Because I don't think Judge Ford knows much about our budget, so.
I don't know anything about your funding.
Okay.
so.
So first of all, this was in last year's budget, so unless you want to go and question everything that was in the budget, that would be a long night, long year. But the second part is this comes from public safety sales tax. What we just voted on is going to bring another savings of $288,000, subject to whatever the exact saving is. So I don't think we have a problem funding that, if that's the question. So we're not cutting anything else to fund that. And the other requests that were made, facilities and so on, are not from public safety sales tax. So you not have competing requests for these funds.
Chris?
I guess I'm going to say essentially what Rachel just said, but in the draft budget that was presented at the last Finance Committee meeting, there's a list of items that were proposed for the public safety sales tax, and of those, of that money, $59,919 was budgeted for this program. The money that Rachel's referring to that was in the public safety sales tax budget last year was for a partial year, and was, when this coordination function was being provided by an outside contractor. The change here is essentially to bring that in-house, which we believe will be less or more cost-effective than having it done by an outside contractor, and to cover the entire year.
John?
Thank you. I think my question's actually been answered. I do think that we have a responsibility. We know that in the budget process, we don't have enough money to do everything we need to do. My question's been answered. I have no questions about the quality of the service that we get out of our court system. I think it's superb, and I'm certainly not opposed to that. But we have an obligation to be sure that the money's there to pay for these things that we're going to be changing and doing, and that was my concern. And it appears that the money is there.
Thank you, Chris and Rachel, for your explanation. James, please.
Yeah, I intend to support this both because I believe in the social aspect and because I believe in the fiscal aspect of it. And what I've understood Judge Ford to say tonight is that if we back off of a service that we've been doing by not passing this, we may not have it at all. I think I may have heard someone, if I didn't hear this, I'll apologize, but I think I heard someone may have said, well, if they don't have this, they did it before without it, they can continue to do it. What I hear Judge Ford saying is that when the standards come out, we'll be done, because it requires that component of it. So
The Supreme Court runs the courts in the
Yep.
state of Illinois. If we're not certified, we're not certified.
So I'm not willing to take a step backwards in both the social and the fiscal aspect of what we're saving with regard to money and the time and spaces in the jail, and so I'm going to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go with Stan and then with Gary.
Well, I always say that, a lot of these things have a lot of merit, and I think what you guys do is amazing, and I'm glad that it's out there. But on the other hand, I hear comments from the public and other people. The war on drugs was a big war, and we've wasted a lot of money, and a lot of positions were created because of that war on drugs. In my mind, this position may help, but it's a cost to the taxpayers every time we add something like this. I've got to weigh that out in my mind because someone's got to pay for it. We've raised fees, we've raised taxes on our traffic tickets, we've raised the amount on that. I just have a hard time when I see everything that's out there, and a lot of this stuff's been there when I was a kid. It's continuing on. I don't see the great improvements based on even what the public is saying about the things that are going on in our communities. I think what we really need to be looking at and focusing on is giving people tools to have a better life, whether that be through work or education, but always hiring people and creating more jobs within a structure that only serves a handful of people at best at times doesn't seem to be the way I'd like to go.
Gary?
I don't question the worthiness of this program, and I intend to support this resolution. I think the one thing that continues to disturb me about these kind of programs is not this program specifically, but I've witnessed in my career of over 40 years continued unfunded mandates coming down from the state. And this will be another one with the increase in standards that will be coming down from the Supreme Court. I guess all I can do is say I'm frustrated with it. It's probably not going to change, but the state of Illinois really needs to step up to the plate and start helping us with some of these issues.
All right, thank you. Are there any other comments? We've got Stan and then Diane.
Yeah, I'm like Stan James. The merit of your program is wonderful. My issue is with all 5 of these items coming up. I know we have budget hearings coming next week. Is somebody going to say, no, we're not going to need this much, we'll give it over here? Because the general court's running a $250,000 deficit. I know we're talking about savings on the re-bond issues. That makes you even. somebody's got to say no. We got to prioritize what we need. I think this is a tremendous program, and I haven't decided whether I'm supporting it. But there's 5 items here that need money, money, money. And the population of the people that we're helping here is minute. Yes, they need it. But there's 99.9% of this county population that's, they also need a few things, and we are not able to help them. So I got a little thinking to do here before we take this roll call vote.
Jeff, I'd like to ask you a question.
Sure.
We've graduated over 200. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
I just have a question. You said that there was possibly a mandate coming down in the next 6 months or something. The one thing that would concern me, is that if you put something like this in place, then here we are possibly having to change it to meet state standards and things, and I'm not willing to go ahead and fund something and then have to go back and redo it again. I kind of feel like Mr. Harper over there that, the program is very good. However, there are a lot of things that need money, and I just wonder if we do this the way it is and then it has to be changed again, then there we are making another budget change. I don't want to do that.
Do I respond to that, or? You need to understand, we're doing right now what I expect the state standards to be. We're not going to lose any. The Supreme Court is in the position where they're in charge of all the courts in the state. They want some uniformity. And so they need standards. So that's why they're coming down with this. I'm just telling you that there's probably certain personnel that's going to be in there. It's not a mandate. They're just saying, if you want to have a drug court, you're going to have to do this. So we lose the ability even to pick up federal funding. Right now, we got federal funding to start with the officer and our coordinator. If we're not certified, we don't have that ability. We don't have the ability to get state funds or state help. The Supreme Court is in charge of all the courts and said, we need certain standards, just as every defendant needs due process and needs to be told the charges against him when he comes to court. This is something that everybody has to do. So I don't think we're going to where you're going at this point. It's basically, let's keep what we have and we will be fine with any certification.
Deb?
Judge, is there any chance when the Supreme Court, releases that directive that they're going to identify any funding to fund these positions?
We're talking about the state of Illinois.
Well, they recently found $8 million to appropriate for court services officers. Is that a possibility?
There's a good chance that some of that might happen. Now, that might be through the court services aspect of it because they're part of the administrative office, the Illinois courts. I really find it hard to speak for the Supreme Court because sometimes they zig when you think they're going to zag. But right now, I know where they're going in Illinois, and I know what other states are doing. The Utah model, there's only some funding you can get that has to have a state agency involved. So Utah is picking up federal funds for a bunch of its courts to get more education and teamwork training, but we won't be able to do that if we're not certified, because you'd have to be certified by the state. So it's just one way to keep us going and to stay with the drug court, really. If you don't want the personnel that they say we probably won't have a drug court. And of course, then we're basically saying we don't want to help the 206 people we've graduated, who most of them are now paying taxes into the base that's going to pay for this. We might as well just have them still out on the streets committing crimes, because that's where we're going back to. And then we'll be locking them all up. And our jail population has been decreasing. I don't really think we want to increase it. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about certification and standards, is basically building more buildings.
Okay, any other discussion? Patsy?
Clarification for Ms. Busey. This resolution just establishes this position. It doesn't establish the funding of it correctly. That will come during our budgetary discussions and hearings. Am I correct?
The funding for this position is included in the problem-solving court fund budget that you have been presented, because that was based on the status quo from this current year to carry into next year. And that's with the documents that you received with the finance agenda this month.
But those could be changed, since we don't know when this is coming down from the Supreme Court as to when it would go into effect. Is that accurate?
Anything about the fiscal 2015 budget is subject to the county board's approval at this point.
Okay.
Say. All right, I think we've had enough discussion on this. Give me a roll call vote, please.
Jay?
Yes.
Langenheim?
Yes.
Maxwell? Yes. McGuire? Yes. Michaels?
No.
Mitchell?
Yes.
Petrie?
Yes.
Quisenberry?
Absolutely, yes.
Richards? Yes. Rosales?
Yes.
Schrader?
Yes.
Schwartz? Alex?
Yes.
Bergson? Cowart? Esri?
Yes.
Harper? No. Harkey?
Yes.
James? No. Kurtz?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you, Judge. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. You guys, I just want to tell you guys have done a phenomenal job. I've watched what your programs are going on for 6 years from this seat, and I want to tell you that just fantastic job.
We've put Champaign County on the map now.
I know.
They recognize us.
We're used as a role model across the state and around the country now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move adoption of resolution number 8992, amending the schedule of authorized positions for the Department of Planning and Zoning as to the senior planner. Al, I would just point out John Hall is here. I would have made that comment about the judge, but he was sitting in the corner there, and I didn't see he was here. So if anybody has questions, I'd encourage them to ask them of Deb and/or John Hall.
Very quiet and just very patient. Thank you, John. Any questions, any discussion on this? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Move on, I would move adoption of resolution number 8993, amending the schedule of authorized positions for the Department of Planning and Zoning as to the director.
Have a second, please. Second over here by John. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd move adoption of resolution number 9000, authorizing budget amendment 14-00032, $80,474 increased appropriations from the fund balance of the Mental Health Board to appropriate additional expenditure authority to meet contractual obligations through 12/31/14. And I would further note that this was sent to the full board by the Finance Committee without recommendation.
Peter, would you? What's that? I need a second on that first. A second okay from Ralph. All right. Peter, on discussion, Peter Tracy, if you have any questions on this issue, please let me hear it now.
I'd
Chris.
like to ask Mr. Tracy to just give a little bit of background on how we got here, since we didn't, there seemed to be some confusion about this at the last meeting.
Sure. And I apologize for not making it to the Finance Committee meeting. I had a family emergency. Basically, this is, the purpose of this amendment is to move money that we have in other funds or lines to be used for the contracts. And if you have the memo that I passed out, you'll see a list of the contracts that we have, which is roughly $3.4 million worth of contracts. And the reason that, so we're not asking for additional revenue, we're asking to use the revenue that we have. The reason that we are seeking a budget amendment or put in a position where we need a budget amendment, there are two reasons. One is that the policy of the Mental Health Board and also the Developmental Disabilities Board is to maximize the amount of money that we put into services. And to that extent, we actually look, we have a model where we project out what our cash flow looks like over a 3-year period so that we can absolutely push as much money out to the agencies as possible. The second reason that we end up with a situation where we have a need for a budget amendment is the fact that the contracts, that whole list of contracts that you have on that page, the term of those contracts is July to June, which matches up with the state fiscal year. And it puts us in a position where we essentially straddle 2 county fiscal years during our contract year. The reason that we do that is because all of the agencies, because of the state funding, their audits, the external audits that they do, are based on the state fiscal year. So our contracts run from July to June. And this puts us in a position where we have better financial accountability. And the other reason is that if we were to require them, if we went back to, had our contracts run concurrent with the county fiscal year, we would have to ask them to do their audits differently, and there would be an expense involved in that. And frankly, we've chosen that we didn't want to spend money on audits. So those are the reasons. The other thing I would mention that causes us problems, and as I say in my memo, as we do business, it's very likely that we're going to be asking for budget amendments to move money to meet our obligations in the future. If you look at the past, we've done this almost every year, and that's because the nature of our business is, very much different than most other county departments. We also are in the process of shifting from grant-based contracts to fee-for-service contracts. This poses an additional problem and that has to do with the fact that if you have, just as an example, a $120,000 contract, $10,000 a month roughly, for the first 6 months of that contract, we're in one county fiscal year. If the agency underbills, it puts us in a position then where if they overbill in the subsequent year, we end up having to ask for an amendment because we don't have permission to spend the money from the previous county fiscal year. So that is the rationale for why we do what we do and why you will probably have us come back to you with future contract amendments. The remedy to that, if this is unacceptable, what we would have to do would be to shift our contracts to the county fiscal year, run from January to December, and that would put us in a position where we wouldn't have that matchup problem. But what we would lose is the financial accountability related to the way the audits are structured. So, I would never recommend that. If you do not pass this amendment, our situation is that we will have $80,000. We will have to reduce the contracts, and I can't tell you which ones, but we'll have to. That would be the purview of the Mental Health Board to make that decision. But we would have to cut $80,000 worth of funding from some of those contracts. It could be all of them. We could do it evenly distribute that. I don't know for sure. The only ones that would not be subject to any kind of a cut would be the ones that are part of our federal match. I think we would have to leave those alone. But that's the rationale. As I said, we're not asking for more money. We're just asking for us to be able to use the money that we have in our funds to manage this, and I'm open to answering any questions that you might have on this.
First of all, thank you for being here, and thank you for addressing that. I think you've described the situation pretty well. And I just wanted to clarify, I intend to support this. I think at the root of this is essentially a technical amendment of the type that we do for other departments on a regular basis when they have money in one line and want to move it to another line. I think the issue, and I just want to make sure there wasn't any lack of understanding between us, was the concern that the county administrator and I think shared about this wasn't so much that, you had money that was in the wrong bucket, or you had money, we had to adjust the budget line to account for the fact that there was an increase in the contract cost, because we do this all the time. I think the concern was the order of operations here, which was that we would have preferred to see a budget amendment prior to the Mental Health Board entering into a contract, which could be foreseen as requiring you to exceed the amount of money that was in the budget line. So I don't personally have a problem with you bringing these amendments. I know what's going to happen. We have the same issue with, RPC and other agencies that have state and federal contracts and state and federal funding. But I think our concern is just as we move forward, we want to make sure that we're on top of the budget, and that means making sure that these budget amendments are brought at the time when we think that we're likely to enter into an agreement that's going to require expending the funds as opposed to after the fact.
Okay, any other?
No, I want you to know that I meant no disrespect to the county board by that, and I think that that's something we can address.
I appreciate it. Yeah, we have pretty thick skins. No disrespect was taken, but on the other hand, we just, we have a tight budget. We got to make sure that we're staying on top of things too. So to the extent that we can avoid surprises, we like to do it. So appreciate your clarification.
Yes, thank you, Peter. We appreciate the explanation, and thank you, Chris. We're going to need a roll call vote on this and 15 votes to pass. Roll call, please.
Jay? Yes. Langenheim? Yes. Maxwell? Yes. McGuire? Yes. Michaels? Yes. Mitchell? Yes. Petrie?
Yes.
Quisenberry? Yes. Richards? Yes. Rosales?
Yes.
Schrader?
Yes.
Schwartz?
No.
Alex?
Yes.
Bergson?
Yes.
Cowart? Yes. Esri?
Yes.
Harper? No. Harkey?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Kurtz?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you. Chris? Similar.
Hold on just a second. I need to get back to the agenda. I move adoption of resolution number 9001, authorizing budget amendment 14-00033. Department 106 Public Safety Sales Tax. This has increased appropriations of $44,851 from the fund balance. Additional expenditure authority to meet contractual obligations through 12/31/14 for the Public Safety Sales Tax Delinquency Prevention Grant. Very similar issue to the one we just dealt with. And this was sent to the board with a recommendation for approval by the Finance Committee.
Thank you. I need a second.
Second.
Quiz. Thank you. Any discussion? It's very similar to the last resolution.
Is that the Youth Assessment Center?
Yeah. What's that?
It's a little different because we know specifically what it's for. This
Yes.
is Youth
yeah,
Assessment Center as
This is more
opposed
specific
to.
than the other.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? Again, 15 votes. Roll call, please.
Jay?
Yes.
Langenheim? Yes. Maxwell?
Yes.
McGuire?
Yes.
Michaels?
No.
Mitchell?
Yes.
Petrie? Yes. Quisenberry?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Rosales?
Yes.
Schrader?
Yes.
Schwartz?
Yes.
Alex?
Yes.
Bergson?
Yes.
Cowart? Esri?
Yes.
Harper?
No.
Harkey?
Yes.
James?
No.
Kurtz?
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Is there any other business at this point? Oh, wait, I'm sorry. We have, yes, semi-annual review of closed session minutes. Deb?
Recommendation is to maintain them as closed.
So moved.
First and a second. Do we need a roll call on this? No. All right. Or any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Any other business? Any new business? What's that? And we will not adjourn. We're in recess. Why don't you understand? We are in recess. Okay? But that means you can still go home. You don't have to stay till next week. You can leave.